August 19th, 2020, Virtual Bristol Motor Speedway. It is the championship finale of an eNASCAR series, but not of iRacing, NASCAR Heat 4, an esports league that was born out of confusion and mishaps. In Season 2, it is gaining momentum and turning into a good spectacle. The odds-on favorite leading this race in the waning laps is Justin Brooks, a top-rated iRacer who made the transition over to console. He is known for being one of the best drivers who can make some of the best setups with a specialty at short tracks. But behind him, his arch-rival, Dan Botafuco, is mounting a charge. Dan is a teenager who has never even touched a NASCAR racing simulator before. He was even dropped by his previous team the season prior, but now he is looking for a fight. And as they pull away from the field and race towards the finish line, what neither of them realize is that today is their final shot, because no driver nor viewer could possibly know that this championship would be the final eNASCAR Heat Championship ever. The tumultuous history of NASCAR console games has been well documented for being inconsistent and producing many disappointments, especially in the past decade and a half. This can all be traced back to 2002 when EA struck an exclusive licensing deal with NASCAR to produce their video games. This knocked other studios such as Monster Games and Papyrus to the wayside as EA produced NASCAR games until 2008. By the time EA produced the last game of their licensing deal, NASCAR 09, the series had started to receive more and more negative feedback and criticism from fans and critics alike. Mix that with the beginning of NASCAR's decline in popularity, and EA chose not to renew the license. From here, NASCAR entered an 8-year period that almost killed all interest for NASCAR games. But in 2016, NASCAR was ready to get serious with games again, calling an old friend in Monster Games. And from 2016 to 2021, NASCAR saw the most consistent and quality release of video games since EA, with the NASCAR Heat series. In 2019, NASCAR saw an opportunity to get into the console esports space with NASCAR Heat 4. This came as a surprise to many NASCAR console gamers since there was only a relatively small competitive community within the NASCAR Heat games. Because of this, the NASCAR Heat Pro series saw competitors come from completely different backgrounds. The best example coming from the two drivers who would become the most decorated in the NASCAR Heat Pro series.
I'm Justin Brooks, Mr. Trackbar 33, as you know me on Xbox. I got started in sim racing way back in 2007 on NASCAR Racing 2003. I played it when it first came out, 2003 itself, but I used a keyboard, never had a steering wheel, never had any of that until my birthday, which was my 15th birthday at the time. Got a wheel, started racing online 2 days later, absolutely sucked, couldn't even hold a straight line at Daytona, Talladega, anything like that, but just got the itch of it immediately racing online against actual competition. Went to the end of that lifespan of NASCAR 2003, came to iRacing in 2009, raced against like all the top guys back then, which was like Josh Berry, Kevin King, Ray Alfalla. I was a 7,000 iRating, and I ran at the time C Open, B Open, which is trucks and Xfinity if people don't know. Then I started dabbing my feet right at the very end to like late models, super late models, street stocks, modifieds. Played that until 2016, and I had a really bad computer, so I just gave up on the iRacing thing at the time. And then started messing around on Xbox a lot. Around the time NASCAR Heat Evolution, NASCAR Heat, I believe it was 4, came out at the time, and I started playing on that, which at the time I was on a controller. And then they started having these esports events. It's like, well, you know what, I might as well go for it. I'm making my own setups. I think I can do it because I'm running with like top guys online, and I just literally started building setups. Hardly played a game, anything.
And while Justin Brooks came to the NASCAR Heat Pro series with a serious sim racing background, his future arch rival could not be any more different.
Dan Botafuco, 23 years old from New Jersey. My first NASCAR game I ever played was NASCAR 08 when I was 7 years old. There's probably a photo somewhere of 7-year-old me with a old Logitech wheel and pedal set. Had to put everything on books just so that it would, be tall enough for me to race. From there, I just was very casual. I'd play with all the assists on easy difficulty. And then once I got to around NASCAR 15, maybe NASCAR Heat Evolution is when I started to get more competitive on it. Wanted to go competitive on the F1 games, so I got an Xbox because that was a more competitive series at the time. Kind of realized I wasn't good. I'll be honest, I wasn't that great. So I kind of took a hiatus from league racing, and then NASCAR Pro League got announced early December.
The process of making the inaugural NASCAR Heat Pro Series was fairly convoluted, with multiple rounds and no guarantee of making the series until a final draft.
Every day there would be a different track with a different car, and you'd have a certain amount of laps to try to hit the fastest overall time, essentially. You'd want to get on the leaderboard and just get your name up on there. From each console, there was Xbox and PlayStation. And they would take the top 50 guys from each of those and then put them into heat races from then on. So I was a part of the top 50 on Xbox. And then we had 4 races. And from those showcase races is what they were called. Actual NASCAR teams will watch those races and kind of get engaged on who they would want to sign to their team.
From what I first heard about it, it's going to be like a little esports series. You're going to drive virtual cars, but it's going to be like backyard baseball, having fictional teams. It caught me by surprise when I found out that we're actually going to be driving for real life teams. We're going to have real sponsors.
In the showcase races, Justin performed quite well, but Dan, on the other hand, was usually in the mid-pack. But with the NASCAR Heat Pro League's heavy emphasis on social media presence, that became just as much of a factor to getting chosen to a team as the races did as draft day approached.
I got a number from North Carolina called me and said, "Welcome, North Carolina." And I picked it up. Austin Dillon's calling me. He said, "Justin, we want to pick you up to drive for RCR here in the Pro League and all that." And he's like, "You down?" I said, "Yeah." Pretty much what I said. But the surprise to me was we're all expecting for me to go to RCR. JTG picks me right before then. So I ended up talking to them after. I explained the story. We all had some good laughs after. But it was like my family at the time then, they were so happy for me. They thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
And while Justin's initial speed alone was enough to get him drafted to JTG Doherty Racing, Dan had a more unconventional path to the series.
You'd also have to make your own video, like your whole intro video. My video is still on my YouTube channel that I don't ever use, and it got pretty good hits. Like, it was actually one of the highest ranking videos, and I honestly think that video is what got me even the chance to race for Joe Gibbs Racing. I wasn't necessarily the best driver. I was so fresh, so new to the NASCAR scene when it came to league racing, especially when it came to setups. But I did okay in my showcase races, but you didn't have to be the best guys to make it to the series necessarily. You had to have good social media and just good overall camera presence. And that's where I had a bit of an advantage compared to everybody else. That's how I was able to get to the Pro League.
The drivers for the first season of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series had no idea what to expect going into their obligations and were shocked to learn the extent of their responsibilities.
They took everybody that made it into the Pro League, flew them all out to Charlotte, got them in the same hotel. We had to take social media classes and all, and told what you can and cannot post on social media. Like, it was the same extent as what NASCAR drivers have to deal with. Talking to the team on a consistent basis, them inviting me to come to the real races, giving me VIP passes, coming up into the pit box, taking me around the garage, in the hauler, introducing me to everybody. Like, it completely blew my mind. It still blows my mind to this day. And I think the cherry even on top of that was being put in a video game, which, like, who can really say out there that races professionally at all they've been put in a video game?
The Interstate Batteries guys, they flew me out to New Hampshire, the real life race, and just had me talk up in front of the stage in front of 200, 250 people, talking about my whole eNASCAR journey. And I'm sharing a stage with Eric Jones, Kyle Busch, and Joe Gibbs. It's like, this was just bizarre. Like, I just couldn't even believe it at that point.
They were the coolest ever because I'm pretty sure I was the only person in the entire Pro League that got to design my own paint schemes for season 1. They knew I designed stuff before, and I showed them some of my work, and they were like, "Okay, get us some concepts. Let's go from there." I showed it to them. They loved it. And they're like, "All right, we're submitting this. You're going to run these all year." And I had 3 different paint schemes that me and my buddy Dylan helped design. And that was just, I knew from then, like, this team is awesome.
But finally, it was time to race. And if the first season of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series could be categorized by one word, it would be a mulligan. Though the series had NASCAR's full backing, the people at Monster Games had not had any experience with running an esports league before, leading to a lot of quirks with the series.
So the game that we were racing on to get to the Pro League, and we ran for the first 8 races of Season 1, was NASCAR Heat 3. Pretty much that game was small modifications from NASCAR Heat Evolution. Pretty much ran on the same game as Dirt to Daytona from back in 2002. So the game felt very outdated. It didn't really feel like something from 2019, to be honest. It just really didn't. The physics weren't that great. You pretty much ran bottom the whole time, and the draft effects were insane. Runs you could build up were almost super speedway-esque, like the whole run. I mean, you only fell off about, I'd say, a second. It never really got spread out at all. And if it did, it was because of pit stops. That was about it.
But regardless of how esports ready the game was, Monster Games and NASCAR were putting their all into this event.
First race, Charlotte, was actually at Charlotte hours before the Coke 600. Now, bear in mind, it was maybe not the best day to do it. It was 100 degrees out in the bright sun, and you could barely see your monitors for one. Also, my wheel didn't work. They had rigs for us, right? But it was those play seats that were like lawn chairs, and I couldn't get my wheel. I had a Thrustmaster wheel at the time. I couldn't get that on the rig.
And while Dan struggled to set up his rig on stage, who was sitting next to him other than Justin Brooks?
I sat beside him at the first ever race we had in Charlotte. Got to know him pretty good. He was always the quiet, like, okay, like, you got to keep an eye on this guy. Like, he's the real quiet guy. You got to keep an eye on him.
But when it came time for the green flag, the inaugural race of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series, it was
a disaster of a race.
This was in part due to the buggy physics of the game, mixed with the aggressive and intentional wrecking nature of the drivers, and the competitors being mostly on controller and not steering wheel.
I had the fastest car, sit on the pole, but got involved in wrecks, kept coming through the field, ended up getting back to third. And after that race of driving through the field multiple times and knowing if I had 1 or 2 more laps, I would have won the race, I was like, okay, I know I can do this now.
So after the first race, Justin made his presence known while Dan got mired a little bit towards the back of the pack. It stayed that way through the first part of the season, but in a move that I am not sure has ever happened before in any other esports series, the entire game changed halfway through the season.
The Pro League drivers were pretty much beta testers for NASCAR Heat 4. Graphically, it looked different. Physics-wise, I'd say it was a bit different too. Setups were different as well, but it wasn't a crazy step up. But overall, I'd say Heat 4 was a lot better than Heat 3. My first season, I was a dart without feathers, to be honest with you. I was really, really aggressive and just didn't have any patience. There were a lot of guys that just did not really, like that. And when I tried to change my driving after a while, they didn't want to get their ass kicked by a 19-year-old kid. Because the overall demographic was like, I'd say late 20s.
So while the game change helped Dan get on a level playing field with people with more experience than him, Justin, his biggest strength was setup making, and with everybody having to make brand new setups for the league now, this put Justin at a great advantage. It was even said that some of his competitors offered him hundreds of dollars for setups for these races, to which he denied.
At first, I was fast, but like, you're racing a loose setup on a controller. I was all over the place, but I was fast. I feel like Kyle Larson when he first come in the Cup Series, just a nice, fast guy, unless you did something to me on the track I didn't like, because I'm the type of person where if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back 5 times harder. And a bunch of people found that out as the season went on. I think it was 3rd or 4th race at Bristol. I knew I had a fast car, and I went in there, and I think I pulled the field 4 or 5 seconds throughout a run. And after that race, that's when it really clicked to me. I mean, that right there, I was like, okay, I can actually win in this thing now. I can actually go for this championship. And reflecting back on it is such a nice feeling, even 5 years later. I still have kids occasionally come up to me and be like, I played with you in NASCAR Heat 5 and stuff like that. Like, talking about the races in general, I always bring that race up because I'm like, this is the race right here that made me feel like I belong here.
Justin solidified himself as one of the fastest drivers in Season 1 with 3 wins at Bristol, Chicago, and Vegas. And though Justin was consistently fast in the playoffs, he did not make the championship four due to another interesting decision by Monster Games.
The first season, which none of us were a fan of, they did a team championship. So you had yourself and for example, my PlayStation teammate. And it took combined points and put you in a playoff system, which I'm pretty sure I was first or second in Xbox points, but my teammate was like 10th or 11th in PlayStation. So we barely made the playoffs. And I think we got eliminated after the first race. And I'm pretty sure I won the first playoff race because, I don't know, that's just the way they had it set up.
Nevertheless, Justin was excited to carry his speed over into next season's Pro Series. Meanwhile, it was a different story with Dan. Dan did not perform particularly well in Season 1 of the Pro Series, with standout performances at the road courses due to his previous experience in Formula 1 games. Ultimately, Gibbs Esports decided not to move forward with Dan into Season 2, meaning that he would have to go back into the pool of every other driver to once again prove himself back into Season 2 of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series.
For NASCAR teams, you either get rid of both your drivers and clean slate, or keep one and take one out. You couldn't keep both your drivers. Both me and my teammate from Gibbs, we both got dropped. That whole first season for me in particular was just a learning experience. Like, I just did not have as much experience as the rest of those guys, nor was I even as good, to be honest. I mean, I started to get better once Heat 4 came around. I got close to maybe getting a win once or twice, but I was never really a perennial contender. But I remember there was a lot of, like, in the off season, there was a lot of us being in the dark. There were points where we really didn't even know if there was going to be a Season 2.
And then, during the off-season, Motorsports Games comes along and buys 704. And while many watching this know the ultimate outcome, one thing that this did bring was a highly experienced group of esports league runners.
And that was a big shift. Like, it was from guys, like, just a bunch of normal guys making a video game, it felt like, to real, like, professional guys invested in esports. Like, these are the same guys who would do the Formula E esports series or the Le Mans esports series. Like, this was a big shift. Like, this was going to get really serious now.
But now that the plans for the next season of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series were a little more clear, it was now time for Dan to fight his way back into it.
It was Chicago in a Cup car, Mid-Ohio in the Xfinity car, Martinsville with the trucks. And my goal was I'm winning every single one of these damn races, just to not get passed up. And we went out there and we won all 3 races. It was at that point where, like, nobody could pass up on me now. You know, I won all 3 races, had another good intro video, should be okay. And then I got signed to Germain Racing.
So now with Dan solidified in the second season of the NASCAR Heat Pro Series, everything was ready to go. And luckily for the drivers, the format and everything about the series was just a little bit more straightforward and a little bit smoother than the previous year. Instead of team championships reliant on drivers on different consoles, the 2 consoles would be combined for the championship race where one individual winner would be crowned. On top of that, rule changes were made to make the series seem more legitimate than the first season.
But the big kicker was everyone had to race in a wheel. Before, there were, like, I would say 60% of the guys, I'd even say 75% raced on controller. And now everyone had to race wheel.
And both of them were ready to take advantage of this, with Dan leveling up his game considerably in the off-season and Justin adding even more to his arsenal.
After the conclusion of Season 1, I went to working on setups even more, built completely brand new setups for different tracks, and I found even more speed and found something that I was really comfortable driving in.
Another technique that both drivers had to learn was the stupid way to save fuel, as many of these races ended up being fuel mileage races.
Like I said, moral story for me, Season 1 is fuel mileage. And
almost every race, I wouldn't say every race, maybe half of them, were heavy fuel mileage races. And how they did that, they would put the car in neutral. You could change every single gear. I mean, you change the final gear ratio, right? But you change the first, the second, the third, and the fourth gear. And what they would do is they would create a 3-speed transmission with an overdrive gear, and they could go however aggressive they want on that overdrive gear. The more bogged down it was, the more fuel would be saved. So they did that strategy, and they were able to keep pace, but they could save 6 laps more and still win with a much more bogged down gear
Due to Season 2 taking place in 2020, there were no live events for this season, and all of the racers drove at home. Round 1 of Season 2 was at Homestead, where Justin Brooks mounted a late charge to take the win. But notably, sharing the podium with him in 3rd place was Dan Buttafuoco, who had just started his first race for a brand new team after being discarded by his old team. But round 2, it was finally, after over a year, Dan Buttafuoco's time to shine.
That's my very first win. I mean, I literally lost my mind when I won that race because I tried so hard, and at that point I was kind of establishing myself as more of a road course guy at that point. This is something I dreamed about since I was 5, like being in NASCAR in some way, shape, or form.
But as the races started to tick on in the season, it was clear that this championship, at least on the Xbox side, was a 2-horse race. In Season 2, the NASCAR Heat Pro League paid $2,000 for every win, which was more than any NASCAR esport had ever had before. Leading into the playoffs, Dan won 3 races at Watkins Glen, Mid-Ohio, and a standout oval performance at Auto Club. Meanwhile, Justin Brooks took most of the other wins up for grabs at Homestead, Dover, Iowa, Vegas, Talladega, and even sneaking a road course win at Road America. And in the last wildcard race before the playoffs, Justin even got a win at Daytona. All in all, Justin and Dan accounted for 10 out of the 13 regular season wins.
My reputation started to get bigger. People started to like it because Brooks was considered the best, and people kind of liked seeing me put a fight to him.
It became a common sight to see Justin Brooks and Dan Buttafuoco back-to-back leading the field by over 5 seconds. Usually though, Justin would get the better of Dan. And for all of Justin's wins throughout the season, the first person that he would hear from afterwards was his biggest fan.
My mom was my biggest supporter, and she watched every single race, would text me before every race, telling me good luck. As soon as the race is over and I won, she would call me, blow my phone up, wanting to talk about the race, want me to come to her house and rewatch the race and talk about it. Then her going on Facebook and telling every single person about it, where people stopping me at gas stations and be like, man, your mom was all over Facebook talking about that race. She's so happy for you winning. And that was like, reflecting back on it, it was really such a nice feeling. And now that she's gone, like I told you, that's one thing that will live with me the rest of my life. Whenever we have kids one day, I want to show them all these races, show them how their grandma was supporting me and all that, and let them try to be able to experience it in some type of way, I guess, through the way she did, with the way that she was so excited for things. Because like I said, there's videos, posts, everything that she's put on there, and I can show them one day.
After dominating the regular season, Dan and Justin both made the championship finale, which was a triple header of races that would lead to one final winner-take-all race. But before that, the first stop at Michigan could not have gone any different between the two contenders.
Pretty sure I led every lap up till the end, was blocking a guy trying to defend a position. The guy got to run to my outside. I really wasn't going to force the issue because I was like, well, heck, we ain't getting paid to win this race like all the other races. I'm like, I just want to make it to the next race. So I didn't force the issue, finished second.
Michigan, I sped on pit road by half a mile an hour, and that almost killed my race. And a yellow came out the lap I was going to pit, and they reckoned right in front of me. And my teammate Kyle, I swear down, I never asked him about it, but I am convinced he did this. This guy beelines for the wreck. He aims for the wreck, and there's cars flipping everywhere, and he crashes into those cars just to create a yellow, just so that I could get saved.
The next and penultimate round would be at Phoenix, which was a lot more routine for both Justin and Dan, with Justin winning and Dan getting 3rd place, qualifying both for the championship final race.
Went to Phoenix, which was the next race, and I pretty much led almost every lap on that, I'm pretty sure, too.
At this point, I knew I was able to run with him. I could run with him and, sometimes beat him. And my goal was just got to beat the guys who I got to beat. That's all that really mattered.
I was a little nervous going in because I hadn't raced against these guys ever. They're on a completely different console. But, I mean, after the first 2 races we had, I was pretty confident because the guys I did race against, they showed a lot of respect for me, and I really appreciated that. And coming into Bristol, like I said, I had a lot of confidence because I won there the season before. I was still pretty confident things would work my way.
And as Justin's confidence grew, going to his favorite track, one that he has dominated at before, Dan, on the other hand, was starting to struggle.
So as I'm practicing for Bristol, I was terrible. Like, I was burning up the front tires because I was locking up, and I didn't know why. But it was because my brake pedal was uncalibrated. So I only really had 1 or 2 effective days of practice. That stressed me out beyond belief going into that finale, to where it's like, okay, I'm on the back foot now. I haven't really gotten to test the car that good.
And now, the final race, the championship finale of Season 2 of the eNASCAR Heat Pro League. In a slight shock to the field, Justin Brooks does not qualify on pole. Instead, he is on inside of the second row in P3. His rival Dan Botafuco is not on pole either. He will be in second. It only takes Justin Brooks a few green flag laps to make his way to the front, with Dan even falling back a spot to fourth. But with 67 to go, a shakeup in the standings with a caution flag and split pit strategy, with Justin Brooks going back to fourth place and Dan Botafuco going up to second, both now trailing Gritton, who is the leader of the championship now. It stays this way until 33 laps to go when Justin Brooks makes a beautiful move for the lead. He now looks to be sailing away with the race and the championship.
We were really good in the short run, not so good long run. I think probably because I think Brooks is just better at short tracks. But I do feel like we were a little bit disadvantaged setup-wise. I think we were a little bit too trimmed out for short run.
But in a game like NASCAR Heat, any little thing can make a lot of difference.
I remember I got rear-ended by Josh Harbin, who was a championship contender in that race.
Unfortunately, on a game, there was this thing that if you got rear damage at any short track or something, it would make you looser.
It was by percentage. So I had 99%, which meant I had 1% damage. And it was on the rear. Now, normally when you get to like 98, 97, the damage affects your handling and you're off pace. Since I had like 99, it was just enough to where it rotated the car perfect.
Which at Bristol, we were starting off tight. So he went from being a quarter of a tenth off of me a lap to a quarter of a tenth a lap faster than me. And I saw him catching me and I was like, well, this ain't good because I'm driving absolute crap out of it and I can't go any faster and I'm hitting perfect laps.
And I ran him down. I mean, we were flying. We were so fast that last run. I mean, we were locked in.
But getting there and passing him were two completely different things. And when Dan finally reached Justin's bumper with 10 laps to go, he had the realization.
I tried to work a heavier diamond, like more towards the wall, to see if I could get a better drive off, but it wasn't really faster. You could kind of like do like a mid diamond and it was faster. It was one lane. The bottom didn't work, so he couldn't really pass him. I couldn't pass him in 5 to go, and I'm like, I've been the cleanest driver all season. I've raced him so clean. I'm like, I kind of have to move him out of the way, don't I?
When it got to me, I mean, I held my line and
I just tried to like punt him a little bit, and it would work. It didn't really work the first time, and then I tried it again, and he washed up the track, and then I got to his inside, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually worked.
that was all great and dandy, but he did surprise me. I didn't expect it, but he gave me a few shots, which was okay, but there was one shot where he stuffed me in the wall.
And he kept dooring me. Like, every time he kept dooring me on a straightaway, and I'm like, yeah, I get it, he's upset. Exit low off 2, and he kept trying to door me still, and he ends up putting himself to the wall.
When he put me in the wall, it's like my car slowed down 30 miles an hour. I was completely in the gas, but it glitched me back like this.
The spectator system for the games were completely inaccurate. So what you saw on there made it look a lot worse than what it actually was. Because he was just so fixated on me that he just kept dooring me every time.
So I had absolutely no chance to do what I wanted to do, but I did think about it.
Then I see him in the wall, and I've got like half a second lead, and I'm like, wow. Okay, 2 to go, let's finish this off, right? And at that moment, I'm like shaking, because one, I thought I was going to get my butt kicked.
If I was close enough, I was going to go in that corner wide open and get him back, but never got the chance. Didn't want to win it that way anyways, man. It's like, I was mad at the time, but we're racing for $30,000. Like, I understand it.
And then it's the white flag, and I just... I can't watch that last lap because I think it's so cringe how I just start bawling my eyes out. I can't watch it to this day. Like, I was so stressed out from that whole season of just working so hard with COVID. You know, there was also like, you know, family stuff. Like, my grandmother was really sick. So like there was a lot of stuff going on, and I just freaking collapsed. Like, I was just overwhelmed and just like lost it. went across the line, because it was a big moment. Like, I won a NASCAR championship. Like, that was something that not a lot of people get to say they've done. When it started to sink in was literally the morning after. There was a whole like media center. It felt like I was a NASCAR driver for a bit. So I was worried that people were gonna think I was the worst driver ever, but no, like a lot of people actually were really supportive and really happy that I won.
He wanted to win it, just like I wanted to win it. He did what he had to do. I mean, in a day, he won the championship. I didn't. Every single person that reached out to me or I talked to in general, they were definitely supportive. A lot of people did talk junk. That, like my mom gave him the nickname Dirty Dan. And I mean, a few of the guys who raced with, they were mad about it and stuff. But I mean, it's like I told him, in the day, like, I feel like if they were in that position, they would have probably done the same thing, as much money as was on the line. I'll just get them back next season.
But unfortunately, that next season would never come, because Season 3 was supposed to be on a brand new game. One that had bigger promises than any NASCAR game in the past decade, NASCAR Ignition.
We had very high optimism seeing the screenshots of the game. They released one in Darlington. We were all like, look at the graphics on that. That looks amazing. And we thought that it was going to be great because they were basing the physics off R Factor. And if anybody's played R Factor, they know it's a really great game.
We had no news going into the summer when the new game was going to come out. Normally, we would get the game a month or two in advance to beta test it, right? And we got the game the same time the content creators did to beta test, which was 10 days before release. And I see these clips on social media of just chaos.
Everybody, every single person that I talked to at least, and we were all in a Discord together talking about it, was disappointed with the final product. And some of us outraged. I was a little bit mad, but there was a lot of other people that was way more mad than me. I expected like them to be able to fix it by the release or shortly after. Nothing was ever done, and it ended up making a company flop.
The game was impossible to drive. I tried to drive Darlington, and it was wrecking on a straightaway. Like, back straightaway wrecking every time. I don't know why. And the controller could work, but it still drove bad. And the AI wasn't very good. Online was so broken you could not race on it. I think the lag and desync was it wasn't playable. I played the game for about a total of an hour and a half and turned the game off. And to that day, that first day of it coming out for us, I have not touched my Xbox since.
Obviously, that was the end of that for right now. I mean, until like maybe iRacing, whenever they release their console game, they have the same thing. But that's just life. I mean, you know, everything has an ending. It just sucks that it ended so soon.
But neither Dan nor Justin have hung up their racing wheel, as both have transitioned back to iRacing. After joining iRacing, Dan was instantly competitive with the top splits, and within a couple years made it all the way to the eNASCAR Contender Series, which is just one step below the Coca-Cola Series. While Justin Brooks has arguably made an even bigger name for himself, not because he has aspirations to go pro, but because he currently has the 4th most I rating in all of iRacing with 10,700. And with the promise of a new console game made by iRacing themselves, the rivalry is not dead yet.
Depends, what time the races are. I'm working now, and I'm working second shift, so I've not been able to really make another run of Coke. It really just depends on how the game is and, whether it's balancing the pros and cons from that in iRacing, really. So I think they'll do a good job with it, hopefully.
I want to, for the aspect of competition and something to prove after everything that happened, and just seeing if I can hang on a completely different game, which I feel like I could. But the only part that doesn't want to, and I hate to even get back in that subject, but my mom was the one that watched every single race, so it'd feel weird to go back racing doing that. And it's like, okay, I'm expecting a call and text after the race and hell of a job, congratulations on the win. And you don't get it, so it's like, do I really want to do it? The more I've been thinking about it, the more I probably would be down. If Dan is listening to this interview when this video comes out, you better get on the iRacing console game. You better make pro along with me, because we got some unsettled business being for real, like racing each other. Not putting each other on the wall. Maybe if the championship is online, maybe I'll owe you one DM.